What is up with Jesus and QAnon? Today we're going to talk about the marriage of Christian nationalism and disinformation. So what's up with Jesus and QAnon and Christian nationalism and disinformation and white supremacy and all this stuff kind of floating around together? Well, from a scholarly standpoint, there's a lot that we don't know right now. First, because QAnon is new. And second, because the links we have haven't really been fully examined yet. But we're starting to do that. So we're going to get to the data in a minute. But first, let's think about why these links might exist. I would expect to find Christian nationalism, white supremacy, and QAnon overlapping to a pretty significant extent, because these are all identities that are based on lies and disinformation, not in the real world. Conspiracy theories are not logical or intellectual. They fulfill this emotional and psychological needs. They're not rational, but they do depend on confirmation bias and otherizing those who are not in the conspiracy cult and a lack of critical thought, just like a lot of religions do. And so does Christian nationalism especially. The Christian nationalists' entire identity is based on disinformation about the American founding. That we were founded as a Christian nation based on Judeo-Christian principles, that our laws were modeled on the Ten Commandments, that the founding fathers were all evangelical Christians who prayed at the Constitutional Convention, and that our Declaration of Independence was based on the Bible. I wrote the founding myth not just to debunk these lies, but to utterly destroy them and the Christian nationalist identity. And so I actually write about this connection, or this expected connection, in the founding myth. I wrote that evangelicals believe in virgins giving birth and talking snakes and all manner of obvious falsehoods. The religious mind is primed to accept lies. Presented with an extraordinary claim, it does not demand extraordinary evidence, but instead engages faith to overcome skepticism. Their religion has taught evangelicals to accept rather than question. So Donald Trump's constant waterfall of outright lies landed on amenable minds. His support was greater among regular churchgoers than lukewarm believers. The greater the faith, the more subordinate healthy skepticism becomes. The biblical fetish for totalitarians may have helped America elect its first. If a mind can be told to disengage for some things, it might do so for other things, like white supremacy and QAnon. But this is how we got the swirl of white Christian nationalism, QAnon, and militia leading this deadly insurrection that was meant to stop a free and fair American election. The lie, the big lie, landed on fertile, uncritical minds. If your identity is based on disinformation, reality seems like a personal threat. Disinformation, and especially political disinformation about the legitimacy of our government, can lead to violence. And often that is the very point of the disinformation. And that is what we saw on January 6th. Now, so far that's just me spitballing. That's just Andrew out here hypothesizing. What do we actually know? We know that white evangelicals, many or most of whom are Christian nationalists, do not share our reality about what happened on January 6th. To quote Sam Perry, who put out this graph, only about 20% agree Trump holds much of the blame for January 6th. Nearly 70% think it was Antifa or BLM. Less than 25%, again, white evangelicals here that we're talking about, think the violence was due to Trump misinformation, and 70% would rather point to race riots. I mean, that is not reality. They are not living in a shared reality. Q is infecting churches. It is finding fertile ground. This is another thing that we know. The problem is that Christianity cannot stand on reason or evidence or logic. It requires faith. And faith requires people to suspend their skepticism. Lifeway Research, which considers itself an evangelical research firm, it works to help out churches, said that 49% of pastors have heard their congregation talking about conspiracy theories. Ryan Burge found that of the people who believe most strongly in Christian nationalism, 73% of them agree with the QAnon conspiracy. 14% of those who reject and fight Christian nationalism believe in Q. So that is just a huge very clear link. We also know that there is a clear linear relationship between biblical literalism and support for the Capitol insurrection. Again, that's from Sam Perry. Let's do 2 more data points. An October 2020 survey of more than 1,700 Americans found that 50% of white evangelicals agreed or strongly agreed with QAnon beliefs. And finally, let's look at all the other counterfactual, anti-reality beliefs they hold. Here's what white evangelical Republicans said in an American Enterprise Institute survey. 89% say the Confederate flag signals pride, not racism. 83% call police killings of blacks isolated incidents. 68% say that COVID deaths are exaggerated. 60% agree that we may have to use force to save the U.S. way of life. And when they say the U.S. way of life, they mean white Christian nationalism. 27% of white evangelicals, the most of any religious group, believe the widely debunked QAnon conspiracy theory is completely or mostly accurate. The common denominator here is religion, a specific, conservative, persecution complex spreading anti-reality religion. When NBC News went to ask people in Marjorie Taylor Greene's district about her absurd conspiracies, from QAnon to Jewish space lasers, here's what one woman said.
Noah was a conspiracy theorist himself, and when he built the ark.
Who are we to say that it's true or not? Well, we're human beings with a thinking brain. There is such a strong religious element to all of this. At its most basic level, Trumpism is a refusal to accept reality, just like religion. They lost, and they refuse to accept that reality with all the contradictions it entails, like accepting the favorable vote counts for congressional races and rejecting the reality of unfavorable vote counts for Trump. Just like religion, accepting and rejecting various bits of reality. And this is important. You cannot understand what is happening right now in the United States without understanding Christian nationalism. You cannot fight back against this movement if you don't know how to battle against Christian nationalism. Christian nationalism is an existential threat to our republic. I've been saying that for a long time now. One of those attackers carried the Christian nationalist flag into the Senate chamber. They prayed to Jesus on the floor of the Senate.
Thank you. In Christ's holy name we pray. Amen!
I could go on and on and on about this, and I will in writing very soon. Trump supporters' refusal to accept the results of the election has other religious elements to it too. It's not just the denial of reality. It's that Trump could not have lost the election because he is God's chosen one. He is appointed by God. He's not elected, he's appointed. So if Trump lost, God lost, and that's just not possible. The bottom line is this. There is a very good argument to be made that we got here, we got to this insurrection, to this QAnon conspiracy, by acting like faith is a virtue. By society and politicians and media treating faith as superior or equal to even logic and reason. That there are 2 parallel ways of understanding our reality. One that's based on observation and testing and description of that reality, and the other that's based on faith. Faith is not a virtue. And by treating it as such, we have hobbled an entire country's ability to separate fact from fiction, to separate fake news from real news, to separate reality from conspiracy. That's it for this video. Please be sure to check out the other parts of this channel. I've got a whole list of videos on Christian nationalism that I'm adding to. I've got a list of my debates and arguments with Fox News and Christian nationalists. So check out the other videos. Please like and subscribe and share. And if you really want to help me out, especially since I'm writing a new book and getting up at 5 a.m. every morning, consider buying me a coffee on Buy Me a Coffee. In the meantime, remember, life is too good to waste on bad ideas.